Something that always does well is the break into tech content. The show me a roadmap of exactly what I need to do to get my first job as a software engineer. That content performs particularly well because it's educational, it's relatable, where to start, where to go, what to do, what programming languages to learn, all of those things that you eventually have to learn in order to, get down the road. I've tried to expand my horizons from that. So sometimes I talk about more technical concepts, like for Hacktoberfest, TBD had submissions where you could make social media content. And I did one on verifiable credentials, and it was really niche. And I knew it was going to be really niche and it might not resonate, but I made it in the same format that I typically do. That's kind of like engaging. Didn't do too well, but it really helped me hone in on some storytelling and trying to catch users' attention, even for those really niche topics that you kind of have to explain in order for people to understand what they are.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Web Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Ocel, the VP of Innovation at This.Labs. Today, I'm excited to be joined by my co-host, Danny Thompson. Danny is the Director of Technology at This.Labs. Danny, how you doing?
I'm amazing as always. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we are happy to be joined by Bree Hall. Bree is the dev advocate at HubSpot and content creator. You might know her online by her handle, Bytes of Bree.
Yes.
Bree, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's great. So we are speaking here. You are our first interview of the new year of 2025. So I think that's a great moment here. I think a lot of developers and everybody is taking a little bit of time to kind of look ahead to the year and maybe look back at the year that just finished. So maybe we'll start there. As you kind of look, as you're moving from 2024 into 2025, what are kind of some of the things that you reflected on in the new year?
Ooh, the first one is probably going to be I made the transition from being a front-end engineer to being a developer advocate. I did that in April of last year, and it had been something that was on my bucket list for the longest time, but I'm not even going to lie, I was scared to do it. So I finally made the jump, and I'm so happy I did.
What do you feel like is the biggest context shift between those two? And what do you like more about what it is that you're doing? Maybe what do you somewhat miss about the previous position?
Absolutely. Biggest context shift is when I was a software engineer, one of the most valuable things I could contribute is code. But being a developer advocate, there are so many ways that I can contribute. Maybe some weeks my most valuable code or my most valuable contribution is code through samples, or maybe sometimes that's going to a conference and meeting with people who use HubSpot and making those relationships. And maybe sometimes my most valuable contribution is a blog post or a video or something like that. So I really like that I'm not locked into one way of contributing as a developer advocate versus my main task as a software engineer was coding.
One of the things that I think people are always interested in or maybe surprised by is they think certain jobs sound so glamorous, right? I remember one of them being like a video game tester. People are like, oh my gosh, your job is playing video games all day? What a great job, right? It turns out it is one of the most back-breaking jobs as far as just the menialness of it. Talk a little bit about dev advocacy and content creation from that, because I think some people look at it and go, wow, how cool. I can work on blogs and do videos and go speak at conferences all the time. That's so fun. But there's a lot of hard metrics and things that maybe can also rob a little bit of the joy from it. So I guess talk about that aspect, how that's been for you, adjusting to maybe something you've always enjoyed doing, but now you're doing it professionally in an attract way and things like that.
Absolutely. It's so funny. When you ask my parents what I do, they'll just tell you that I fly from place to place and I hang out with a bunch of people. So I think sometimes that is what developer advocacy can be seen as. You're seen in a lot of places. You're seen online. You're seen at conferences. You're seen doing talks. You're seen in Discords, wherever. You are seen a lot of the times. And that was one thing that I knew but didn't realize would affect me so much, is the constant need to feel like I'm on. And it's partially because people know me, or maybe they recognize me from something that they've seen online, but also now that my likeness a little bit is at least tied to HubSpot because that's where I'm a developer advocate, I want to make sure that I'm helping the community. I want to make sure that I'm being the most assistive that I can. So that was something that I did not realize was going to affect me, and not necessarily in a bad way. It's just, a change of mindset and a change of thinking. I think one of the other things is making sure that I am, for instance, if I'm doing a talk, making sure that I'm getting a lot of that work done prior to an event so that I can actually enjoy the event that I'm going to. Because for the first couple of times, I was updating my talks almost like to the second right before giving them. And then I realized, oh, wait, I've been sitting in my hotel room or I've been sitting somewhere with my computer up and there's all these developers here who are gathered and they're having fun and they're networking and they're doing the regular conference stuff. But I'm sitting here making sure that my talk is together because, like that's a part of the job and making sure that like all of those pieces are together. So I think those are probably two things that come to mind that might seem glamorous, and they can be. It just takes a little bit of extra planning.
I'm really bad at that too. I love that. You look at your photo roll and it's like you getting on the plane, you getting off the plane, nothing, then your talk, then tons of photos, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'll say one thing that, I find interesting about a lot of dev advocates. We did the Commit Your Code conference. This is one thing that I saw. People were leaving one conference, flying to another conference, then flying to another one. That travel is just exhausting, at least from my mental perspective, very exhausting. I couldn't fathom it. I wouldn't do it. How do you stay, number one, I want to say grounded because so much is happening. It's going to the airport for me, even though I've got like the TSA pre-check and the clear and all this and that, it's still a very difficult process to stay productive during that time period. What are ways that you're staying productive? But on top of that, like, have there been like little tips and tricks that you've learned through all this where you're like, if I do this beforehand, I get a better experience, or if I do this, I can stay on track on some of the workload that I'm doing?
Absolutely. So I traveled twice a month all year last year, which maybe was a lot. I was a little ambitious. My suitcase was in a state of somehow always packed and then never fully unpacked. I think one of the biggest things in terms of travel was investing in a really nice kit of things that I use at home and just getting those separate so I'm not pulling stuff out of like my regular bathroom or my regular toiletries to try to like pack those all the time. Having a separate travel like toiletries kit and sometimes even a separate travel wardrobe almost where there's only a couple things that I'm taking on the road with me, throw those right in the washer like as soon as I get in and then pack them again. That was really useful and really handy to me. One of the other things in terms of productivity that I had to get used to was working in the airport or working while traveling. I was really bad at that because I have the version of ADHD where I'm like, oh, I have all these tasks. That's going to be enough time for me to sit there and then start working on it. And then I get there and I open my computer and my brain can't focus on anything. So what I did is I gathered like a list of small tasks that I can do, like almost itty bitty things. Like maybe I'm catching up on an email or two when I'm sitting at the airport before I get on the plane. Or maybe if the plane ride is long enough, I have already specced out like a sample that I want to build or that I want to create. And I can start working on one piece at a time, like really small pieces. That way, if something happens or the Wi-Fi doesn't work, I don't feel like I'm completely thrown off. And then something that I also had to get used to was being okay working on and off hours. And this is something my team is really, really excellent at. We all kind of work different hours, like depending on what's going on. But I think especially as a developer advocate, when you know that maybe I'm up at 3 a.m. because I'm headed to the airport and my main airport is Atlanta and it can be a different kind of beast. So my team knows, hey, Bree might be taking a 2 o'clock nap because she's already been up for 12 hours. And then maybe I do a little bit more in the evening or the afternoon. Figuring out what that travel schedule looks like was really important for understanding what pockets I can be more productive in.
That's such a good point. I love that too, that idea of collecting small tasks, especially with ADHD, right? Because you kind of gamify it a little bit, then your brain switches over to that, how many things can I get done before I have to be done type mode. One thing that worked out for me, because I had to travel a lot last fall too, it wasn't for conferences exclusively, but for some business travel, was I like just learning for yourself what you need that anchors you to your routine at home. And like it can be simple things. So for me, one of them is I make sure I get my diet Mountain Dews. So I always make sure I find a convenience store when I land somewhere to get my diet Mountain Dews. And then I get up and work out. I love starting the day. I'm not this way normally, but when I'm on the road, I'm this way.
It's different.
I just like being ahead. of the game a little bit. It makes me feel good. Sleep, not so great, but I like to make sure that I get to the gym and things like that. And I found that helped reduce the feeling of being dysregulated, I guess, with travel.
Totally agree. I always have a face mask, and I invested in this little luxury skincare kit. It's just like a travel one, and I don't use it when I'm at home, but it just helps when I'm on the road because I'm like, oh, a little piece of luxury whenever I get to travel somewhere, and it just, adds a little bit. It's a little perk.
Yeah, some people think I use a face mask because it's so flawless, but it's all natural. I don't do anything for it. Same way, like the brush that I have, it gets a lot of use as well, as you can tell. So that's there. I will say, traveling-wise, the extra kit of toiletries has been useful. I will also say one thing that's helped me was using the tablet keyboard setup instead of my laptop setup, so I can actually work on the plane. Has been a great investment. I'm really happy about that. I got a lot of work done on the flights last year compared to what I normally do, because for me, typing so cramped, and then you're on that I don't always have the luxury of flying first class. So that little tight area to have that tray there, it doesn't really work well for me productively. But with that tablet and that keyboard, it seems like there's a lot more room, and I feel like I can get stuff done. Plus, I can always pop back into tablet mode anytime I got to move things around. It's been a pretty successful setup so far. I'm glad that I invested in that. So kind of getting back into things, with it being the new year, and we kind of touched on some of the things that we're planning for this year. Are there any things that you're planning not to do that you were doing in 2024?
Ooh, I hope to not pick up a new tech stack. I really hope I don't. Last year, I was really ambitious, and I was really trying to keep up with a lot of the trends and all the new frameworks. And I was learning a lot, but what that would turn into is I build a project with something and then I don't use it again, or whatever it is. I finally found what I think is the current stack that I'm going to stick with, which is Astro, React, and Tailwind. And I feel like we're locked in, we're cuffed, because I finally made a template repo so that I can build quicker, and I feel like it's official.
Yeah, I like Astro. I wouldn't say I'm like the largest fan of it, but I am a fan of it. I do like it. I am a big fan on Tailwind. Like during the holidays, I was building a platform and I was using Tailwind, and it felt so great to have a CSS utility that made the responsive factors significantly easier to deal with in all those breakpoints. But it also felt great from like a workflow standpoint, because once you get in the flow of knowing your classes, it's really easy to kind of start putting them in there instead of having to go back and forth and like create something brand new for each one. I even got in the habit, this is like the little trick that I sometimes share with people, that when it comes to Tailwind, sometimes they say it's really hard for them to pinpoint where a certain component is being styled at. And so my first class is always a custom name that I give it, so that way identifying it in the inspect element is significantly easier, or stuff like that. That's like been my biggest way to identify things. I don't know why more people don't do it. They probably should, unless this is a bad practice I know nothing about. I'm sure somebody on Twitter is going to let me know right now, but I've always done it that way, and it's been really successful for me to kind of identify which component is going right, wrong, or at least the specific style point, which one is picking up on that element.
I love that. One of the ways that I make it a little bit easier to work with is creating, and I talked about this on Learn with Jason, it's a mini design system almost for your project, so that you're really componentizing those really common things like buttons, or your headers, or if I'm doing a blog, making sure that my blog elements are all componentized in a design system format manner, almost, if you will. That really just came to be because I worked on a design system, so that architecture was just ingrained in me to a point. But it's really helped out in that aspect of trying to figure out where your classes are, making sure that the class names aren't too long, the debugging, and everything like that.
One of the things that stood out in one of your goals that I like is this idea of fewer tech stacks. But with that, I'm imagining the goal is to go deeper in that tech stack. And I would say that is a recommendation I would make to a lot of people, is that there is a lot of temptation right now, especially with all the AI stuff coming out and all the different technologies coming out, to just want to sample everything. And I think even hilariously, the people that are most prone to doing this are more junior engineers who haven't yet been had one thing ingrained deeply into them. I'll make a huge push for people becoming deep experts in at least one thing. For me, that used to be C#. When I was at my peak of my development career, I was very deep into it, and I even knew how the code was going to turn into some of the intermediate compiled languages, and I could debug some of the machine code stuff for really tough problems. And it's like, when I went to JavaScript, because I never spent the time to really learn any one tech stack that deeply, it's like I've never gotten back to that feeling. And I've been talking to people a lot about that. It's like I miss that feeling of knowing my stack top to bottom, inside and out, and starting to really learn the intricacies of how it works. So I like that. And I think a lot more people maybe should look into that as a goal for this year.
I totally agree. And especially what you said about sometimes junior developers falling into that trap. And I will say it's definitely more of a do as I say, not as I do, because I know I shouldn't have tried so many, especially if I knew that the projects weren't going to really go anywhere. But I think that also gets back into, why am I building? Sometimes I'm building just because I'm curious about something. Sometimes I'm building because I want to learn. Sometimes I'm building because I just need it to move quickly and I want to have something solid. So I think it all comes back down to that as well, the why. And being a developer advocate, I know that I'm learning a lot across a lot of different topics anyway. It's just natural and it's just part of the job. But if I can prevent myself from falling down the same trap I did last year, I'm going to do it.
I'm with you. Sometimes I build for certain criteria reasons. I got a client I got to deal with. I got a solution that I have to deliver to a problem, something along those lines. Sometimes it's just fun, man. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of talking about this before we did the podcast, but during the holidays, I was building that platform. I was having a blast. Plus, I also wanted excuses where I can start using some of the React 19 features that I wanted to learn about. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what better way to kind of mold both worlds? Felt like I grew as a developer, but I just had a blast. And it kind of, I found myself in the situation where I want to share certain stuff with the public, right? So I'm sharing screenshots, I'm sharing this, I'm sharing how I approach this problem, which was great. Then the other side is well, how much do you want to share before you actually know the answer to this thing? You're sharing hey, this is what I built, but I still haven't figured out the most beautiful version of what the solution can be. And so it kind of brought me to this standpoint where, as we were talking earlier about building in public and sharing that content and that creation, building your profile up as a developer in public. Where do you find that balance for you? Is there points where you're hey, I really like this aspect of, because I know you're very popular on TikTok, you're growing platforms everywhere right now. But it's where do you find that balance? And also what do you find this is worth sharing, this is not worth sharing, this is worth vlogging, this isn't? Where do you find that for yourself?
Yeah, so for me, I don't do a lot of live streaming currently where people can see my aha moments, real time as they happen. So a lot of times it's me finding a problem or trying to solve a problem or building something just for fun personally. And then there are at least 1 million lessons that I learn along the way. And usually I write those down because I'm if I learn this lesson, maybe somebody else didn't know this, or maybe there's a way that I can help somebody. And the ones that make it online, because I only have a certain amount of time in the day, unfortunately, are the ones that I find that I'm the most proud of, that I either push through, or the really quirky bugs. For instance, I wanted to build a Game Boy or a Nintendo Switch with CSS. And there were some CSS properties that I was really struggling with and struggling to make some things fit on the page. And what happens to me is I get hyper focused and I can really fixate on those things when I'm doing it for fun and when I'm just trying to make it work because I'm curious. So then I sit there and I spend 2.5, 3 hours trying to get this switch to work. And that's an instance where immediately, as soon as I got it to a place where I thought it was cool for me, is when I shared it. Was it the most polished version? Was it the most polished code? Absolutely not. But I was so excited that I got something that even resembled a switch, and I just had to share it.
Great. We have more of this conversation, but we're going to take a moment here to thank today's sponsor, This.Labs. This episode is sponsored by This.Labs, who is your partner in modern web development and consulting. Here at This.Labs, we specialize in empowering businesses to reach their full potential through technology. We understand that in today's fast-paced tech environment, adaptability and efficiency are crucial, and that's why we offer you tailored solutions designed to meet your unique challenges and objectives. And our commitment to excellence and client success sets us apart as a trusted advisor in the industry. Discover how This.Labs can transform your business. Visit us at this.co to learn more about our services and how we can help you stay ahead in the competitive landscape. Thanks to This.Labs and my team for sponsoring this episode and allowing me to have cool conversations like this. All right, let's get back to our conversation. So, Bree, I wanted to kind of keep going off of that because, I think there was a really fun conversation going on around the holidays online where people were I think people fit into different categories, and I think everyone knew that they were okay with their category existing, but didn't necessarily want other people to be in other categories, or at least didn't want to feel like maybe their category was wrong. And I think the answer is that none of them are wrong, but there are some people out there who, coding is their job. That's how they make their money. They have no passion for it outside of work at all, other than just, being a professional and becoming more skilled. There are some people who who code for work and then like coding a totally different way outside of work. Like they love doing fun little things or whatever that is. And other people, they just love coding and building products. They build products at work, they go home, they build products at night, or they build content and things like that. And I think it was fun for everybody to kind of learn that everybody's a little bit different. And I guess I'm curious your thought on where you fit on that spectrum and kind of how you navigate that. And also just in the idea that like when I think about it for myself, I find I often beat myself up because I'm like, no, I need to practice. Like you said, I got to get faster at building things. I need to learn React and Next better. So I'm going to work on this really serious deployed app. And I find like when I sit down, I can effortlessly fall into doing like a bunch of leak code problems for fun. I'm that kind of nerd. Or like the advent of code that just happened. I love getting nerd sniped by the advent of code. And I think part of my resolution for this year is just to embrace the fact to enjoy the things that I actually enjoy instead of forcing myself to try to do the things that clearly my brain is not that interested in.
I think you said it perfectly. And I think you accurately described how I'm feeling. So on social media, we see the highlight reels, right? We see the highlights of what people want to post because that is what their version of enjoyment is. And especially on places like TikTok, where we are seeing a lot of computer science graduates come out. And one of the biggest things that happens in software engineering interviews, we know, is the leak code, data structures, and algorithms problems. And there are a lot of excellent and amazing content creators that go through and really do deep dives on those questions and show people exactly how to approach them and understand like how to attack them in the interview. And something that I felt for a little bit was that I was not a good tech content creator because I don't like those. I don't like leak code. I don't like those like HackerRank. It's just not my thing. They kind of stress me out. I like get the sweats a little bit. And I was like, well, crap, if I can't do these kinds of videos and if I can't show that I can do this, who's going to trust me about when I say that I know how to code or when I say that I'm working XYZ place? And I think you perfectly said it. Like I just said, you like to do those things. There are people just like you who love like a really deep diving into almost that competitive programming aspect that you can get into. And my lane that I like to stay in is creative. It's explaining to people like programming concepts in a realm of something that has nothing to do with programming. I did a talk about React in the realm of Zelda and relating those concepts to Zelda because that was interesting to me. And I think it's more so if you enjoy doing leak code, I love that for you because you're going to teach me so much. And if people, for instance, are more leak code or maybe not web dev and they come to my page, they can see that I'm breaking things down in a different manner. And I think we all have something to contribute to it as a whole versus feeling like we're competing against each other or that our way of enjoying programming is wrong, because nobody's way of enjoying programming is wrong. If you're enjoying programming because you're getting paid, if you're enjoying programming because it's fun, if you're enjoying programming because that is what you want to eat, breathe, live, and do, it's all right.
But I think at the same time, too, the people that don't add texture to the community as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, our friend Tessa, who likes to post about her animals on her farm,
yes,
like that's great content to have, too. You know, so many people that like talking about musicals or they like talking about games or they like talking about whatever it is. you need that texture too. So I think, like you said, it's fine too if you don't want to code outside of work. You don't have to feel compelled to do it. I mean, there are implications for one's growth speed that are undeniable, right? If you do something more often, you're likely to grow faster at it. But at the same time, if that's not what your passion is, I think still share the things that make you passionate. Because like you said, I enjoy that stuff on my timeline.
Yes. And it makes
like
you
a break.
well-rounded person. It makes you a person. It makes you somebody who's not just sitting behind a keyboard. It gives you personality.
I'll say this, the internet is the type of place where it's like, if it's not one way or another, people get mad about it. I personally think you don't necessarily have to have this as a passion to do well at it, right? I do think, though, when it comes to things that you are passionate about, you should have the passion to want to be better at the thing that you're working at. But it doesn't have to be the thing that you eat, sleep, and breathe off of work hours. But I do, and I agree with Rob, I do love seeing the things that people are passionate about sharing, like Tessa and the wildlife that we saw, the farm animals, and even she's talking about doing like a farm party thing. And I was like, that's hilarious. But I do think there are avenues for both. But I think that also comes into the whole content creation side. Like, if you're not passionate about it, maybe don't make content about that thing. Make it about something else. It doesn't have to be about your 9 to 5 to where now you're dreading making that content after hour work. Well, let me ask you this. Any advice? So, and the reason why I ask this is TikTok is something that I'm not super well versed in. I obviously want to grow on that platform as well. But have you found like the magic formula to where you're like, if I make this, even though it's developer focused, which definitely seems to be a much smaller circle on TikTok, right? Have you found that magic formula of like, this is going to do well on this platform versus others?
Absolutely not. And that's something that I've been trying to figure out genuinely over the past, I'll say like 6 months to a year. Something that always does well is the break into tech content. The show me a roadmap of exactly what I need to do to get my first job as a software engineer. That content performs particularly well because it's educational, it's relatable. Everybody's, or not everybody, but the people who want to become a software engineer.
A bigger group of people, yeah.
Yeah, they have been in a situation where they didn't know where to start, where to go, what to do, what programming languages to learn, all of those things that you eventually have to learn in order to, get down the road. So that always does particularly well. I've tried to expand my horizons from that because I don't want to just be somebody who makes content specifically for beginners, but for people who are at different levels of their career. So sometimes I talk about more technical concepts, like for Hacktoberfest, TBD had submissions where you could make social media content. And I did one on verifiable credentials, and it was really niche, and I knew it was going to be really niche and it might not resonate, but I made it in the same format that I typically do. That's kind of like engaging, kind of skits, and something that's like relatable. Didn't do too well, but I think if anything, it really helped me hone in on some storytelling and trying to catch users' like attention, even for those really niche topics that you kind of like have to explain in order for people to understand what they are.
Here's what's funny. I want to get both of your opinions on whether you think long form is dead. I ask that because, I enjoy shorts as much as the next person. Usually I like it for, usually memes and hot takes and little info drops. But what surprised me is when I was talking to some of the young people we have on staff, the youngest people we have on staff, that they go to TikTok for tutorials. Like, they go for their learning content, not just to learn a fact, but like to go through a series or whatever else. And I was surprised by that because I'm kind of the group of people that was loving the era of the 4-hour podcast, right? And just putting something in and going, well, this is what I'm working on all week, basically. What are your guys' thoughts? Is that stylistic, or do you think that that long form is dead?
Well, I'll even add one extra thing into this. What threw me for a loop is a friend of mine. We were going out to, I moved to Dallas about 2.5 years ago, new city for me. And so I've made quite a few friends here. And one of the friends, we were going out for dinner. We didn't know where to go. And he pulled up his saved list on TikTok. And he was scrolling through to see, like, which restaurant do I want to go to this time? People are using that as a reference point now to search for places to go eat. But then, for fun, he even showed me, he's like, I literally type in TikTok, my city and restaurants to see. And that is where he starts pulling up recommendations. He's like, I've had better success with this than I've had even with Google results when I'm Googling for places to go, which has blown my mind. It's changed the way that even I'm approaching how I approach restaurants. Me and my wife were big on like trying out different places. And so this has been our new method of finding new restaurants. But I will say, at least for me, I have not seen anything on TikTok as far as like long form tutorial or like in-depth tutorial that's great. But it kind of hits on one standpoint that I've believed for a long time. Even when it comes to certain events, I like doing short lightning talks at certain events because I'm like, if it piques curiosity enough for you to start researching this on your own, we're now in a very nice flow for you to start learning. But if you think you're going to learn everything in a 60-second TikTok, that's not happening, right? It's like, so, but you know, that balance kind of makes a difference. That's the way that I see it going forward. Even with some of these reactionary content videos that we're seeing pop up in the dev space, a lot of it is they're giving you their feeling on it. But guess what? You're now interested to the point where you're researching this thing, you're building something with it. I think it has its purpose.
Totally agree. I don't know when the last time I went to go search for things to do in whatever city I'm going to on Google. TikTok is always my go-to. I'm going to Salt Lake City for the very first time in March. So me and my sister, the first thing that we did is look up Salt Lake City food, Salt Lake City things to do on TikTok. And I think it's because you can see and get people's genuine reactions. Or even if they have an opinion that like, oh, they didn't like the food, at least you can see it yourself or see the environment or atmosphere yourself. And I feel like a lot of places that maybe aren't SEO optimized for Google tend to fall under the radar, but people who live there and know about it share it, and it gets shared out a lot more on TikTok. So I've definitely seen the rise of using TikTok as a search engine versus, you know, like going to Google as a primary. In terms of tutorials, I haven't seen, I'm sure there are like full scale tutorials or like different parts of tutorials in a series on TikTok, but more so what I've seen is people going over features or like releases. For instance, React 19 is coming out, or I think already is out, and people will go through and say what's changed or like what something new is and just stick to one topic or one sort of like changelog item and explain what its repercussions are, like what you might have to do in order to upgrade and things like that. And those are really, really helpful because like Danny said, it piques my interest and I'm like, oh my goodness, let me go look and see what else React 19 is going to be able to do. And then I get the full scale of it. I don't think long form is dead though. So just to answer your original question.
No, but I will say that one TikTok showed me a unique way to use the use optimistic hook from React 19 to where I implemented it in that event platform I was building. And I was like, this was a really cool use case. Like, for example, use optimistic hook. It's saying basically like you think everything optimistically is going to work out the way that you want it to. If it doesn't, then it'll do an action. And so basically what they were doing is use optimistic hook was maybe somebody's entering something in a form and it's displaying that information below. Like maybe you have people that are competing in a video game and they're putting their high scores into it. It's automatically by default adding that score in there. And if something goes wrong, it will then make that score like a vague grade to show you like, this didn't work, try again. And I was like, I like this implementation, and I started using it in different ways. But that TikTok brought on that idea. So it was a good like, oh, this kind of inspired me a little bit, and I tried that out.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. I guess what I've noticed in my own like consumption habits of content is that, again, I've always liked long form content, but I've really learned in the last few months as content has just become so ubiquitous, right? As more people are trying their hand at it, and I'm giving it a try, is that it's when content is done well, it seems so simple and like, oh, obvious. All you have to do is turn a camera on and talk, and it works. And what I've noticed is that sometimes there's a topic I want to hear about from people I want to hear it from, and I'm so bored after a couple minutes into the conversation that I'm done. And so what I've found is like a lot more what I've liked as a style is mediated conversations. This comes up a lot more on Twitch streams or YouTube streams where basically one person is having a conversation with hundreds of people, and viewpoints are being brought up and then discussed and then mediated in that way. And I say that because I've found I bounce off of Twitter spaces too. I've tried a few and I don't enjoy them as much. Again, some people do, and that's great. It wasn't work for me, but I think it's because I'm kind of more tired, as we're saying on a podcast, of hearing people just talking back and forth. And I'm loving this idea of play. So for long form content, that's what I've been trying to find a strategy for, is more play, more ways to have a conversation that involves more people, even if it's not more voices speaking, but more things being raised up, considered, and then set back down.
Yeah, it's funny. So here's my belief, and I've said this for a while. If someone can do well with short form content, they've kind of earned your trust in a sense. They've built a relationship with you. And when they go into long form, a lot of the times people will kind of go with them, right? When you make long form content without building that relationship up or that I don't want to say repertoire, but rapport with your audience, they don't really know what you're going to bring them. So when you do long form content and immediately they're like, wow, this is boring, you've abused that relationship. And so now they're like, I have no reason to give you my time anymore. They completely abandon you as a whole. When it comes to short form content, if you build up that, and I'm seeing this even with TikTok, people trying to translate their growth into YouTube. In the beginning, it was really slow for a lot of them. Now, I feel like so many people automatically go to their profile, hit that YouTube link, and transfer over. They feel like that trust in that relationship has grown. And I see that, right? And plus the other thing too, I do like one thing that you pointed out as far as the relationship of one to many. I think that does work out. For me, I personally can't watch streamers. There's no way I can dedicate multiple hours to just sitting there watching somebody stream. It's just not worth it for me. So oftentimes, I'll wait for the YouTube version of that stream to come out to where it's more condensed, and I know they're respecting my time, because no one owes you the time to view something, right? I don't owe you the time to watch your 45-minute video of whatever. But if I now know you took a 4-hour stream, condensed it down to 45 minutes, there's probably going to be a lot more value or meat and potatoes of content there for me versus that 4 hours of you trying to find your groove after an hour and a half where that monster wore off and now you're trying to get it back again.
I think that's so funny. Especially what you say about once you've mastered short form, then people will follow you to long form. In 2018 is when I started long form, because short form wasn't really here yet. I started on YouTube, and I was kind of late to the short form train because I was like, I know I can do a YouTube video. I can structure it. I can put the graphics. I can do whatever I want to do, and I know it's going to be how I want it to be. But if I'm going to do short form, I can't just talk for 30 seconds. I can't just put and condense everything I have down into a minute. And I didn't realize that it was not just about condensing it or narrowing it down. It is a completely separate skill. I approach, now since I'm back on YouTube, funny enough, I've done kind of like a V. Now that I've gone back to YouTube, I think those short form skills that I learned and had to hone in on after starting with long form content have made me a better long form content creator from short form content, if that makes sense. Keeping people's attention, making sure that your hooks are good, making sure that you're explaining things quick enough, but also in a way that they're going to understand, where they're not going to swipe away 20 seconds into you explaining something. And trying to keep that retention is something I didn't realize I did not actually have when I was originally creating YouTube videos. I thought that since I was just putting the information out there and I had a script, and since it was well formatted, that was going to be enough to gain and keep people, but it's not. So those are skills I actually, like you said, got from my short form audience and are translating to my long form audience again.
My hope for anybody here that's listening for content that they want to create, but also to content creators that might be listening, is I think one of the lessons to learn from the React era, not React.js, but React content, is that people are hungry to hear people process information. And I count myself in this. I'm tired of being told what is. I want to engage with somebody who's processing what is and is tossing it around in their head and giving me ways to think about it and turn it over on this angle and that angle. And I think that's why so many people now are watching content through streamers, through YouTubers, through whomever, is because they aren't interested in the facts necessarily that are being laid out. They want to hear the discussion that it raises. And so I think if you're making content, you might feel like you have to add in all the background to get going. And I think that's when I check out of videos a lot, is oh my gosh, it's just facts. Get to the part where you actually grapple with facts and reorder it in some way. And I think that's the people that'll be most successful are the people that do that. So move away from pure React content, but still keep this idea that people want to hear information processed, not just information for its own sake. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but
I do. I see that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for me, I know that that's something that I'm still working on, a little struggle point. It's hard because if you put a video or tell me to do a video and I know that I'm going to record it and I can cut it and I can edit it and I can slice it down however I want it to, easy, no problem, hands down. You tell me to get on a live where I have to explain what I'm thinking as I'm processing it is when I get a little bit scared. And the internet is the internet, and people on the internet will do what people on the internet do. And sometimes some people are nice and they, like you understand like how I'm processing it. Maybe I have not arrived at the exact destination, but I'm working through it. You can see it. You can hear what my thought process is, even if it's not like 100% correct. But then there are those people who are like, oh, I already know this. Oh, you're not thinking about it in the right way. Oh, you're missing this. You're doing this. Having to process what they're saying or what they're giving in terms of feedback on how I'm processing is a little bit stressful. But I know that those moments of seeing me work it out and seeing me like process it in real time is really helpful, because I never want it to seem like I just knew this in 2 seconds. Like, it's so easy. Everybody can do this. No, it takes time. All of us had to take time, like to get to a certain point.
Awesome. Well, that's going to be it for us today. As we close out, Bree, can you let people know where they can find you online in case they want to see some of your content or connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am at Bytes of Bree on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, X, whatever it's called, and YouTube as well, and just Bree Hall on LinkedIn. So Bytes of Bree and Bree Hall.
Great. Well, that's going to be it for us today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this Modern Web podcast. Thanks, of course, to our guest, Bree. As always, we like to say the conversation does not stop here. As you heard, you can find Bree online in most places at Bytes of Bree. You can find me online at Robocell. As for Dan, you can find him online at dthompsondev. As for the podcast, you can find us online at moderndotweb.com or on Twitter at modern.web. And as we close out, we'd just like to thank our sponsor, This.Labs, one last time, who would like me to remind you that, hey, sometimes it's hard to bridge the gap between business objectives and tech implementation, and it can get messy. This dot is trusted by top names like Meta, Google, and T-Mobile, and we love helping business leaders fulfill their strategic digital initiatives. Check us out at thisdot.co. One more time, that's thisdot.co. All right, thanks, everybody. See you next time.